And also there's an actor from Diary of a Wimpy Kid who I grew up watching.
Rodrick rules. Man.
Yes, Rodrick rules.
Yeah,
Yes,
yeah,
where I was
absolutely.
like, oh my god, that's Rodrick.
Yeah.
When it comes to movies that are covered here, they usually have a close connection to my early childhood. Some of the videos that I've covered, like Voltron or How to Train Your Dragon, are ones that I saw in an early age and have stuck with me over time. But while everyone had different tastes growing up, I think everyone saw the Diary of a Wimpy Kid movies. I stopped collecting these books around the 9th book, The Long Haul. Growing up, I was a small, scrawny kid in elementary school, so Greg, he was a pretty relatable protagonist. But when it comes to the books compared to the movies, I consider the movies to be way better in every way. As I got older and grew as a person, Greg never did. And that's fine because it's a book series, but he just became insufferable to me. In the movies, though, Greg throughout grows, and each one is about him fixing or growing in a relationship, whether it's his best friend Rowley, his brother, Holly Hills, or even his dad. So let's take a look at one of my personal favorite trilogies. So for starters, there's not a whole lot of information when it comes to the production of these movies on the internet. The best is that Jeff Kinney had a small blog about the events as well as a handful of interviews when the movies were being released. If you're looking for more of an in-depth look at the making of the film and the casting, you have to read. That's right, it's a bit weird, but most of the information pertaining to the production is in the Wimpy Kid movie diary, released just a few days after the movie. This was so cool to get as a kid because this actually made me start to get interested in the behind the scenes of movies. It basically tells the story about how Jeff Kinney came up with and wrote the first book all the way to the wrap up of the movie. Practically everything is covered here, from the extras, the props, differences from the books, stunt doubles, hairstyling, editing, casting, and the writing. It's a really interesting read and actually comes from the perspective of Jeff Kinney. It got updates along the way with every movie that came out as well, so my volume just goes over the first one while there's others that go over all three. Definitely check it out if you get the chance. So I want to put you in the seat of where movies were in 2010 when Diary of a Wimpy Kid was released. You had massive tentpole movies throughout that year. Alice in Wonderland, Toy Story 3, Iron Man 2, How to Train Your Dragon, and The A-Team. But Diary of a Wimpy Kid still made a killing, grossing $75.7 million on just a budget of $15 million. For myself, I thought that the movie was great as a kid, but as time has gone on, this movie is almost unbearable at times for me. I much prefer Rodrick Rules and Dog Days over this. That's not to say that this movie is bad, it's not for a kid's film. It looks nice, the movie was shot on actual film, the music is iconic, but when it comes to the characters and story here, that's what really holds it back from me. It does serve a purpose though, because we don't actually follow a hero, we mostly follow what is the villain of the story. Greg in the first movie is not a likable protagonist in my opinion. Rather, he grows into one in the second and the third movie. But here,
Hey! It's mine, fella!
Greg is just a terrible person. But the weird thing about that is you still oddly root for him because he's the underdog of the story. You want to see Greg pull through and make it out of the hole that he's dug. But at the same time, I still hate Greg and see how bad of a friend he is. But it's justified, however, the way it's presented. I think that while the other movies have better cohesive stories, this one in comparison is like a slice of life anime. You consistently see how terrible of a friend Greg is every day, from the name calling, the putting down, not being sorry about the arm, and finally it's the safety patrol fiasco. I like that it's a slow build up to Rowley and Greg's friendship crumbling. If Greg was a perfect friend right from the beginning and he made one mistake and that's what caused Rowley to walk away, it wouldn't feel believable. So yes, while Greg here is a terrible protagonist, it serves a purpose. You want to see him overcome his selfishness, and instead of treating Rowley like a sidekick, treating him as an equal. I think, though, all the credit should go to Zachary Gordon. He just oozes charisma and plays Greg perfectly, in my opinion. no one will be able to do as good of a job of him in this role. It's like trying to recast Spock, which they've done twice now. You will always think of Greg when you see a picture of Zachary Gordon, and the opposite. But what about the others in the cast? Well, for starters, playing opposite of Zach is Robert Caprone. And Robert plays Rowley perfectly from what the books describe him as. Someone that's sensitive and who's happy being himself regardless about what others think. Robert is able to pull this off so well. So when we see Greg consistently put Rowley down or get him into a mess, you feel for Rowley. The acting here is done very well. When I was younger, I didn't think, oh, that's not Rowley or that's not Greg. No, these are perfect casting, and that goes for even more. Rachel Harris plays Greg's mom, and she has some wonderful scenes where she tries to counsel Greg. Greg never takes the advice, so you just want to choke the kid. But over the 3 movies, you see how Greg more so goes to his mother for advice rather than his father until the 3rd movie. Now, the father is played by none other than Steve Zahn.
The Zahn!
Now, Steve doesn't really get a ton of work to do here until more so the 2nd and especially the 3rd movie. But his casting was vital. So while here he's a bit of an afterthought, as I stated, each movie works on a relationship of Greg's here. In the 1st movie, it's about his friend Rowley. The 2nd movie is about his brother, and finally his dad. Which, oh, I didn't forget. Devin Bostic is 100% Rodrick. No one can replace this man as Rodrick.
Let's go, baby hippo!
Rodrick is as much Devin Bostic as Devin Bostic is Rodrick. He is the only reason this movie is funny to me. All of his scenes are comedy gold.
Trot down the winding yellow road. Does she?
And in the next movie, he gets to shine even more. So yeah, for a first movie, it's not bad. It was a very faithful adaptation that satisfied me as an avid fan of the books. But like I said, I just don't like Greg here at all until the end. As I said, it serves a purpose for believability, but he's just rotten to the core throughout the runtime. As I stated, Greg changes, and those changes do carry over to the next film, though. Okay, let me get something straight. This is the best movie in the series. Everything here is improved for the better. Everything you may have hated about the first movie is cut out here, and everything that you liked is made more prominent. Liked all the scenes with Rodrick? He's practically the main character here. Didn't like how Greg treated Rowley? He's a better friend now and less of a narcissist. Didn't think the Zahn had enough to do? He has better and more memorable lines here.
You picked the housekeeper over the supermodel?
I think that the writing and the directing of this movie is really good and focused. All the little pieces that it sets up all come back and form a complete puzzle by the end. David Bowers directed this in Dog Days compared to the last film, and he's actually had a pretty good hand in directing and working on kids' movies. He directed Flushed Away as well as the underrated and forgotten Astro Boy. Everything, though, here, as I said, is leaps and bounds better than the first movie. Its heart and humor especially. The heart of the movie focuses on the relationship between Rodrick and Greg and their brotherly dynamic. The movie starts off where they're forced to spend more time together, not really wanting to. Slowly, though, they both see how they can rely on one another. A brother isn't just someone you have to be around constantly. They can be a friend and a person that you can depend on. I like also that when the relationship crumbles halfway through, it's not due to the pictures themselves, but how Rodrick feels wronged that Greg told their mother.
You're my brother. She'll never be my friend.
Rodrick's trust in Greg falls apart until Greg gains it back with Rodrick's respect as well. That's why this movie is loved so much. The relationship between Rodrick and Greg is something that everyone can relate to with their own family. With that being said, the movie is pretty funny.
If there was a lock, I would use it. In fact, maybe you should put one on.
You know, why write a new one when there's a perfectly good paper already written by your brother?
Okay now, Devin, in this shot, just eat the chicken wing non-stop. Wait, why does he have to? In the script, it's just normal banter. It's what the entire story hinges on. Can you not see that? And what's that? Relatability.
Isn't that cheating?
Also, one of my favorite jokes is when the dad discovers the pictures.
Rodrick, can you explain what you're doing in this photo?
That's not me.
That's not you?
Nope.
There's something that is changed from the books for the better here, though, in my opinion. For instance, Holly Hills. I think that she was maybe in like one book, and once Greg was called Fregley on accident, he lost feelings instantly. But here, it's a small budding romance that's worked and dragged over to the next film. It's nothing amazing, but she's not some throwaway character that pops in for a couple scenes. The movie is the best in the series, no doubt about that. I just like how well the story was laid out, and the writing, and the humor, the characters, the directing. But while the next movie isn't as good in my opinion, I do like the main story just as much. Alright, so Dog Days has a worse and better story than Rodrick Rules. Let me explain. Greg in the first movie, one of the lessons that he had to learn was lying. Same goes for even in the sequel. But here, Greg is kind of like he is in the first movie. While he's friends with his brother due to the second movie and his relationship with Rowley is fine, this story tells about the relationship between Greg and his father. But my only issue with this is that most of the movie hinges on a storyline that Greg is lying about working a job at the country club. I do, however, like everything after Frank discovers the truth. I think once this storyline is dropped, there is some of the best writing for a father-son dynamic, just like with the brother dynamic in the last movie. I like how at one point Riley gets told by his parents that they're disappointed in him, and Greg doesn't quite understand why Riley's upset about it.
Why are you upset? They didn't even yell at us.
Getting yelled at by your parents was something that you could easily blow off the next day, or be forgotten even in an hour. But once Frank tells that he's disappointed in Greg, that's when he finally understands it.
Aren't you mad?
No. I'm just disappointed.
Having someone tell you that they're disappointed in you is hard to put into words. It's more subtle and quiet. It's telling Greg that his dad, someone who thought could trust him, no longer can. Once this scene plays out, Frank and Greg don't talk to one another for a good part of the movie. Only the bare necessities. They're forced to sit next to one another and sleep together and stay together. It's awkward, but it's also heartbreaking. I like, though, that Greg does learn his lesson and speaks up, and he admits his faults when he needs to.
I did it.
And in turn, his dad defends him for it.
Shut up, Stan! Just shut up!
I think that the main lesson of all three movies is displayed here in this monologue that is spoken by Steve Zahn.
You know what my grandpa always used to say? A man who never made a mistake never made anything. The trick is to be responsible and to learn from your mistakes. And you can do that. You're a really great kid, Greg. And I'm not just saying that because we're a lot alike.
Dog Days is not better than Rodrick Rules in my opinion, but it's so close. If it wasn't for that beginning how Greg was basically set back to zero, I would love this movie more than Rodrick Rules. As for the humor of this film, it does have its laughs though, where I burst out laughing every time I pop this on.
Why are you hugging me when Mom isn't around to see it? Get off me!
Of course, every single one of them have Rodrick in them. So near the end of the movie, Rodrick's band gets a gig for Heather's Sweet 16. And when that happens, one of the greatest scenes in cinematic history occurs.
Oh, wow. Oh, wow. What's your favorite song? Oh, wow.
The Diary of a Wimpy Kid movies are all pretty good kids movies. They feel like they're being written by adults who understand what makes kids tick. What a real relationship between siblings is like, or a father and a son, or even two best friends. These are not my favorite movies of all time, far from it. But I don't think a lot of people understand the point of all three movies. They tell the story of someone who starts off as a terrible person who slowly improves as a human being. I honestly wish they were able to make more of these though. I think they would have had to shoot Rodrick Rules and Dog Days back to back, while then shooting the next back to back. Kids grow up, and that was very evident in Dog Days. These movies are not perfect, but they did give us Rodrick.
Seriously, why is he eating a chicken wing?